Hello, welcome to episode 219 of the Craft Ice Magic podcast. My name's Ellie and I'm coming to you from Norwich in Norfolk in the UK, and today is the 4th of August, so welcome everybody. I hope you all had a lovely crafty week since the last time I've spoken to you, and I'm here to share all the things that I've been making in the last 7 days. So today we have some knitting, some crochet and some sewing. I have 3 questions from the Ask Me Anything thread in the Ravelry group, which are all knitting related and actually really interesting questions, so stay tuned for those. I have some confessions. I have a blast from the past which is related to the confessions that I'm going to tell you about. And then I've got some information on my shop update, and last of all I've got a little appearance from Jensen at the end of the podcast. So we've got a couple of Makalongs going on in the Ravelry group and on Instagram. We've got Craft 20 a day, which is working a little bit on a project every day just to get it done on those bigger projects, so that can be any craft. And we've got the Craft Ice Magic Summer Sock Along 2022, which is any sock. It could be crochet or knitted, or if you can make a sock out of another method, that's absolutely viable. And those 2 Makalongs, you can do progress photos as well as finished objects, and they are on Ravelry and on Instagram, and the hashtags are in the description bar down below. And we have recently started the Craft Ice Magic project bag Makalong, which is basically any project bag that you've made from my patterns, either the zipped or the drawstring patterns that I've got on my website, the sewn patterns. And you can pop your finished objects on Instagram using the hashtag I've popped in the description bar down below. So let's get on with the knitting, shall we? I have a finished object to show you, and it is a pair of socks. So these are the really gorgeous self-striping yarn that I got from Giddy Yarns at the East Anglia Fibre Festival earlier this year, and I have finished the pair. So it came as a gobstopper ball with a stripey and with a 20g mini of the contrast colour, which is brilliant, and I love the way these turned out. So I just wanted to make a short pair because they were very summery colours, and I managed to get this pair, and I got quite a bit left of the yarn. I'd probably say I had about 15 grams left. So I used a top-down method. I cast on, I think it was 64 stitches for this sock, and I knitted 12 rows of 2x2 ribbing, and then I basically knitted the tube until the end here, and I made sure that I'd got enough cuff and leg, taking into account 2 inches for the heel and 2 inches for the toe, so the length of my foot minus 2 inches and 2 inches, so minus 4 inches altogether, would give me the length that I need for this bit. And then obviously I need a little bit of length for the leg, and it'll be about 2 inches from the ground, if that makes sense, so I can work out how long I need to knit the tube before I then finish off with the toe, and then I did an afterthought heel. So I more or less did the same sort of thing as I used for the tutorial I did, where I split a sock tube into 2 pairs of socks, but this time I just knit a tube and put the toe in, and then just did the afterthought heel instead. But I just made sure that I'd calculated that I'd got enough length here to be the length of the foot plus the length of the leg that I wanted. And isn't this yarn gorgeous? So this is the Cherry Blossom colourway by Giddy Yarns, and I do believe that she's had a lot of people asking her about these gobstopper balls, and she hasn't got any in stock at the moment. I believe she's restocking in October-November time, so watch out for that. What I suggest you do is, if you go over to her website Giddy Yarns and subscribe to her newsletter, and then you'll see when the gobstopper balls are back in stock, and they are rather gorgeous. That's what the gobstopper ball looks like, well, at least when there's only a bit left, but Helen winds them so beautifully, and I've got a little bit left, about 3 grams I think of the contrast colour. I like to do an afterthought heel or a short row heel when I've got self-striping yarn, because it doesn't interfere with the stripes then, but I think they're really lovely. So the next thing I've got to show you is a sort of finished object, but not quite. And it's my little butterfly that I'd started last week, and this is supposed to be a butterfly and cocoon, but I haven't done the cocoon yet. But this is the butterfly finished, and if you look really closely you can see that my one wing is smaller than the other one. And I finished it and I thought, oh no, this first wing that I knitted, I actually ended up not doing enough increases when I did the first edge of the wing, and then consequently, because I've then decreased it, the decreased row is a bit shorter because you've got less stitches to decrease, and then my wing is smaller, it's definitely smaller overall. But actually I thought when I finished it, it's really good if Jensen sees that not everything is completely symmetrical, and in nature things can be a bit varied. So I think I'll leave it how it is, because we don't want him to think that everything has to be perfect. So he's got little antennae at the top, and I have made sure that I have stitched these so tightly so that they're not going to come off. So I think it is safe for Jensen to have. Plus, anything like this, if I give it him to play with, I'll keep an eye on him. I wouldn't just leave him playing with it on his own, in case he sort of sticks it into his mouth and chokes on it or something. I did show Jensen his butterfly earlier, and he did love the colours, and he was stroking it, which was rather sweet. So that is finished. This pattern is actually written for sport weight yarn, and I've knitted this in a 4-ply. So I think actually the knit is a little bit loose really to be stuffed to this size. So what I probably do next time is go down a needle size. I did use the 3.25mm needles, which is what was listed for the pattern, but obviously sport weight yarn. Maybe go down to 3 or maybe 2.75mm for the 4-ply. But the butterfly is finished, and I'm hoping to get the cocoon finished for next week. That would be so lovely. The instructions for the pattern seem quite straightforward. Sometimes you have to read it a couple of times because making toys is, well, at least I don't make that many toys. It's a bit unusual the way you sort of have to follow the pattern, so you might need to just read it through a couple of times, that particular section, before it sort of sinks in, but it's relatively straightforward. And now I'm going to go on to some crochet. Now I haven't done a lot of this, but because I hadn't shown it on the podcast for a few weeks, I thought I'd show you what progress I have done, just to show you that I'm actually still working on it. So this is the Ziggy Interrupted wrap by Sandra from the Cherry Heart podcast, and this is such a lovely pattern. I love it so much. So the colours I've chosen are quite muted, and I actually picked 4 colours instead of 5, I think the pattern suggests. So when I did these squares here, I didn't follow exactly how Sandra said to do the combination of the colours, because I only had 4 rather than 5. So I just did them randomly. I think they look okay. I joined these little squares in one of the darker purples, because actually that was the one that sort of blended in the most, because these lighter colours have the sort of darker speckles in them anyway, so it went really nicely. I did start to join them in the lighter yarn, and actually on the darker squares they showed up a lot more, so that was interesting. So since the last time I showed this to you, I've done about that much on this panel, but I have finished the first of the panels now, which is looking really nicely. I'm a really slow crocheter, I think, but I have started making a couple of these little squares to do the next section, so that is coming along really nicely. So the colours that I have used for this are the 2 different dark purples are Poison by Ducky Darlings, Snail's Pace by the Woolen Witch, which is this sort of mid-tone purpley beige colour, and then I've got this one which is the Camel's Yarn, and I think this is called Love Letter. So I've put those 4 colours together in a sort of purpley beigey combination of yarns, and I think that looks really nice together, especially the combination of the zigzag and those little squares. So that is my crochet to show you. So now I have the sewing section of the podcast, and I've been making some trousers for Jensen today. So these are the Tangerine trousers, a pattern by Sew Over It, and I really like this pattern because there is an option to have feet in there, and it just saves losing socks. Especially when it's not quite warm enough to wear wool socks as well. These would be an ideal thing for him to wear when it's a little bit cooler as well. He has had a couple of pairs of these previously, and I did make a 3 to 6 month size, and actually he's only just grown out of the 3 to 6 month size, which is brilliant because they are quite big. I will show you what Jensen looks like at the end of the podcast in his little appearance, so you can see what the fit is. But this is the 9 to 12 month size, and actually a lot of his clothes that he's wearing at the moment are 9 to 12, or some of them 12 to 18 months actually, when he's got his big nappies on. So you'll be able to get an idea of what the fit's like when Jensen has them on a little bit later in the podcast. So they've got quite wide legs on these and a sort of narrow waistband, but I found when he had the smaller sizes, 3 to 6 months, that I had to roll it down for quite a while. But then actually, because of this long waistband, I could then unroll it when he grew a little bit more and they lasted a little bit longer. Obviously, because I have made the version I did before with feet as well, they didn't last as long as I could have done if I'd have not done them with the feet. But I quite like having the feet. It's a nice little feature there, and they last a little bit longer than wearing the all-in-one. I think I picked this fabric up from Fabrics Galore, although it was a long time ago, and it is actually leftover fabric from a top that I made for me. I was going to wear this top to show you, but it's too hot to be wearing longer sleeves, and it is a longer sleeve 3/4 length top. So I'll have to perhaps show you in the podcast next week what that looks like. But it's a sort of a medium to lightweight cotton jersey, and you've got the actual waistband is doubled over, so if you do turn it over you won't be able to see the inside of the fabric. I've used an overlocker to join the panels together, and the feet construction was pretty easy actually. The only thing is, when you stretch this piece over the bottom of the leg, you just have to stretch quite a bit. So when I first made my first pair I was thinking, this seems a lot to stretch the fabric of the foot over that leg, but that's how it works, and it makes a nice little booty shape for a nice little baby foot to go. So there we go. That is my tangerine trousers and a pattern by Sew Over It. So now I've got a few questions from the Ask Me Anything thread. So first of all, I've got a question from Linda, and she was noticing that there wasn't any pooling at all on my sparkle cardigan, which I showed you on the podcast last week, and that is one of my own hand-dyed yarns. And she was asking me, do I alternate skeins? And that she was saying that she was really scared of making like a garment with hand-dyed yarn because of the differences between skeins and knowing what to do. Now, I would definitely recommend alternating skeins. With the cardigan that I'm doing, I alternate it on the front band so that you don't see any sort of jogs in the yarn, and I believe if you're doing a garment in the round you can do helical knitting, and I'll leave a link to one of Babel's Travelling Yarns tutorials on how to do that. But with a cardigan I just run the yarn down the front edge, just keep swapping the yarns every 2 rows so that you don't get any pooling. I do find, as long as you purchase the yarn, certainly from me anyway, in the same batch that you're going to knit a garment with, the colours do tend to be as close as possible as they are together, because obviously they are hand dyed. There might be very slight differences, but if they are dyed in the same batch, the likelihood that they're not going to pool is much better. I would suggest that if you avoid things like very speckled yarns and yarns with a lot of different colours in when you're doing a garment, if you're really scared of pooling, because you're more likely to get pooling if you choose those yarns. I find that speckling is notoriously difficult to get exactly the same on every skein and on both sides of the skein as well. So if you avoid a lot of speckles, or for ones that look very obviously speckled, avoid those if you're scared of pooling occurring, or areas that might be more speckled than others. And obviously if you've got a lot of different colours in the yarn, that are very obviously different from each other in that particular yarn, that will show up more. So if you use tonal yarns that are dyed in the same batch from the same dyer, you're less likely to get pooling. So I hope that helps, Linda. The next question is from Judy, and she's talking about knitting socks. So she says that her normal stitch count per inch is 9 stitches per inch when she's sock knitting, and she's been asked to make a size 10 man's sock for a gift, and the yarn that she's purchased, she's getting 7 stitches per inch, which is obviously quite a bit different from the 9 stitches per inch that she normally gets. and she was asking me what is the sort of normal stitch count for an average man's sock. I would be really careful about this. I personally don't like to look at average measurements. I like to measure the person's foot. I have got a video on how to knit socks that fit, where I talk about the calculation I make to work out how many stitches that I need to knit a pair of socks for a particular person. So basically, I've just used this as an example, but say you're going to be knitting a sock for somebody and you're able to take measurements anyway. I would make sure that you've got a measurement of their ankle and also of their foot round here. Now, it's obviously going to be a bit of a pain to be taking multiple measurements up and down the leg, because obviously there's a bit of variation up the length of the leg. But if you think, right, the sock's going to come to about here, I'll take a sort of average measurement, so you've got a bit of an idea of how big their leg is going to be. And then you can make a calculation as to how many stitches you need for the top part of the foot. You can then go ahead and do the heel, however method you use. And I find actually, if you're doing a heel flap and gusset method, that does get, I do find you do get a better fit with that. That when you're doing the decreases down here, you can then decrease to the amount of stitches that fits perfectly with the circumference of the foot as well. So you don't have to have the same number of stitches up here as to down here. So I have a video that I talk about that in, so I will put a link in the description down below, so hopefully that helps as well. But when Judy says she wants to know the sort of average man's sock size, what I did is actually I found a website that tells you roughly the average size of the foot circumference. So round this bit, the average foot circumference of somebody with a size US 10 foot, and it says that it's about 10 inches. So when I'm actually do this calculation, I always do negative ease, because negative ease, I'll make this sock nice and snug. So normally I take 1.5 inches, 2 inches off the measurement, get the width of sock you want to knit, which will then stretch over your foot and fit nice and snug. So if you've got a 10-inch circumference foot down here, I'd take 1.5, 2 inches off. So this case I'll take 1.5 inches so that it's not quite so snug. And that means you've got 8.5 inches of knitting to make. And then if Judy, you're getting 7 stitches per inch, I do 7 times 8.5, which will give you the stitch count that you need to have on the foot, and that comes to 59.5. so I'd round that up to 60 stitches. So I'd do 60 stitches on the foot, and if you can't measure them, I'd just stick to whatever you've calculated for the average that size of that person is for the foot, and on the leg I'd do it the same. But absolutely ideally, if you can measure them around the ankle and on the foot and do that calculation where you take away the negative ease so that it's nice and snug, and then times that by how many stitches you're getting per inch, that'll give you a lovely fitting sock. If you're knitting a really long sock that comes up to like knee high, you might need to do several measurements, like where the calf is the biggest, so that you can then do some decreases so that it fits snugger around the ankle. But for a normal sort of average medium length sock, you can just get away with doing one measurement. So hopefully that helps, Judy. But like I said, I have got a video on how I explain how I make socks that fit by doing some simple calculations. And don't panic, they are really simple. Just write that calculation that I have talked about on here, also the video I have mentioned. If you write that calculation down and replace those numbers with your numbers and use a calculator, it's really simple. Don't worry about it. It's much simpler than you think. I think a lot of people think, oh, maths, but it's not very hard, and you can always get somebody else to double check your maths as well. So the third question I've got is from Knitting Sutra, and they were talking about changing the sleeve length on a garment. So for my sparkle cardigan that I've been knitting, changed my length of my sleeve to 3/4 length sleeves, and the original pattern is describing the sleeve to be a full length. Now, in order to just make it 3/4 length sleeves, I've literally just followed the decreases down to where I think I want it to be. And what I keep doing is I keep trying it on, thinking, oh, is that the length I want it? Is it fitting nicely round the arm? Is it too big? Is it too small? And you can actually modify whatever the decreases are in the pattern itself if it doesn't fit. But I find quite often, as long as it sort of fits up here, the decreases as you go down the arm will fit you really nicely, and then you just literally stop at the point where you want to stop to be 3/4 length sleeves, instead of carrying on, and you've just been doing the same decreases as the instructions say for the long sleeve, and you just stop a little bit earlier. If you do find that you have got quite slim arms though, you might find that you want to decrease a little bit more frequently, and just make a note of how often you've decreased under that arm so that you can get the measurement the same. You can do those decreases the same on the other arm. So it's literally just the same as doing the long sleeve, just stop knitting earlier and then do the ribbing a bit earlier as well. Having said that though, I do find that once I pick up stitches around the arm and then I think, right, which size am I going to knit for the arm, I'll knit the smaller size for my arm compared to my body. Because I'm quite curvy, I find that I always need to go down a size or two on the arm. So really think about what are your measurements on your arm, go for the size that you want to knit the rest of your arm. If you are going down a couple of sizes from the body to the arm, I find that I have to do quite a few decreases early on under the arm every other row or so, to get down to that size, so that I've got the right stitch count for the size that I want for my arm, say two sizes down from the size that I've knitted for the body. So I'll just carry on how the instructions say for the size that I want to knit that fits my arm, rather than the same size as the body. I've digressed slightly. Hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully that helps you knit a garment that'll really fit nicely. Don't be afraid to change things and have a go at doing some extra decreases or less decreases to fit your particular figure. So next I have confessions. Okay. They're nice confessions though, so it's okay. So I saw that Diana Vingert had got some beautiful patterns on 70% sale, and I believe that they are on sale until the 7th of August. So pop over to her Etsy shop and you'll be able to get that discount as well. But I've bought 4 patterns from her Etsy shop that I had my eye on a little while, and I'll pop a picture on the screen of what those look like. But like I say, 70% off, I couldn't resist. Even if I don't sew them all. Absolutely gorgeous. She's got a beautiful style, and she tends to use quite a lot of threads at one go, so it is quite a quick embroidery project. So if you're new to embroidery, I definitely recommend Diane. So there we go, that's 4 patterns purchased in my stash. I will hopefully get a chance to sew some very soon. Maybe this weekend, we'll see. So moving smoothly onto my blast from the past, I thought I'd show you one of Diane's patterns that I've already sewn before. So this is actually one of her free patterns, and it isn't actually designed to be with a clock, but I've put it in with this clock because I thought it'd be really lovely. This pattern was designed to be in sort of burgundy colours, but I've chosen the colours that I wanted to go with my lounge, and you can actually see what time it is. I will tell you more about why it's this late in a minute. If I can find it, I'll link it in the description box down below as well. But it's absolutely beautiful. There's some roses there and some little delicate flowers all the way around. And I've tried to use sort of blues and greens to tone in with our lounge. And this clock actually, it's upcycled. There was a different face on the inside and it was just a little bit sort of old and tired, so I ended up painting the frame on the outside and covering the inner bit with this fabric with the embroidery that I'd got on it, and I think it looks really, really nice. I'm really pleased with how this frame's come out. When I got it, I actually bought it from a car boot sale, and I just loved this frame, and I always thought that I'd paint it, but then I had an idea to do some embroidery for the inside, and I think that's come out really nicely. So that is my blast from the past for this week. So now is my shop update. So I now have all the advents and the project bag sock sets all to do with the Jolly Jingles theme in my online shop. So I will leave links to the listings in the description bar down below. So the advent is either a 12 or 24 day advent. You can choose 10 or 20 gram minis and on a number of bases, and you will get 12 or 24 individually wrapped mini skeins of yarn with a few little extras. So if you buy the 12 day one, you'll get 3 little extras, and if you buy the 24 day one, you'll get 6 little extras, and they'll be in random days, so you don't know when they'll actually be in the package you're opening, so that'll be a bit exciting. And I'm also including a knitting pattern. That will be a cowl pattern this year, and it'll be one of those cowls that wraps around twice, but I will show samples of that a bit closer to the time before it's released. But this will be included in the yarn advent as well. That will be emailed to you in PDF form in November. So if you purchase the project bag and sock set, you'll get a medium-sized project bag, which I'll have done free motion and a plique on in a design relating to the Jolly Jingles theme. And you will get a full skein of yarn and a 20 gram mini sock set, and that'll be in the choice, your choice as to what base you have it on. There's 4 different bases that you can choose. You will also get a sock pattern included, which will be in the Jolly Jingles theme, with a couple of little extras as well. So you have different choices. If you don't want a yarn advent calendar, you can have the sock set and project bag instead, or you can purchase both as they're all different colours. Last week I introduced quite a few more opal yarns into the shop, so they're all in the shop, and I also introduced some bag making kits. So if you're looking to make a handmade project bag, I've got a kit as well as the patterns on my website, so I'll leave links to those in the description bar down below. So now I just wanted to explain why I have recorded the podcast so late, and why this is uploaded tomorrow instead of the normal Thursday day. So it's now Thursday, but it is really late in the evening, and I've only just got a chance to record because poor little Jensen has had an allergic reaction to some egg that we've given him to eat today for lunch. So he's okay now, thank goodness, but we took him to hospital because he had come out in all a rash all over his face, and he was having trouble breathing, and he really panicked us, but thank goodness he's okay. Oh my goodness. But he's been drinking lots of milk and other non-egg related foods this afternoon, and he's absolutely fine. He seemed quite happy, even though he couldn't breathe properly, to be honest, bless him. But he's okay now. So I apologise for the podcast being late, and hopefully we won't have any more delays in the coming weeks, because we had a delay a couple of weeks back, didn't we, because he was poorly. But I was poorly as well, so I couldn't really record when I wasn't feeling well myself. But I think that's all for today, apart from Jensen's little appearance. Now, this will be recorded tomorrow, so you're today, if that makes sense, when he's had a bit of a chance to recover from his ordeal today, bless him. But here he is in his tangerine trousers. Over to you, Jensen. Hello, Jensen! How are you getting on with your trousers? So you can see that they are quite a bit big actually on him. They're the 9 to 12 months size, so he is only 8.5 months, so I would expect them to be quite big. I'm thinking actually with the ones with the feet in like this, I might put some stuff on the bottom that you add to socks to make them grippy so that he doesn't slip over when he's sort of crawling around. And he's got his t-shirt, his Elm t-shirt on that I showed on the podcast last time, and that's another sew over it pattern. So that's the tangerine trousers and the Elm t-shirt, and they're both made out of scraps of fabric I had in my stash. So thank you very much, Jensen, for giving us a bit of a twirl. Can you show us the back, Daddy? Oh, they're lovely. I'm really pleased with those actually, but like I said, I might pop some grippy stuff on the bottom of the feet so he doesn't slip over. You gonna say bye bye, Jensen? Thank you very much. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I shall see you in the next podcast. Bye!